Welcome to the Mass Incarceration and Population Health and Health Disparities Symposium. I am Ana Diaz-Rue, and on behalf of the Robert Wood Johnson Health and Society Scholars Program, which is one of the funders of this event, as well as the Center for Social Epidemiology and Population Health and the School of Public Health here at the University of Michigan, I'd like to welcome you all. This kind of event is really a hallmark, I think, of what the Robert Wood Johnson Health and Society Scholars Program strives to accomplish, which is to bring together various fields and disciplines to think about new ways of understanding and acting on population health problems. So we're delighted to be able to host this symposium, and you'll hear a lot more about the structure of it from one of the other directors of the program, Jeff Mornoff, in a few minutes. I did want to let everybody know that this is being webcast by the Michigan Public Health Training Center, and we have over 300 people online listening. We will also be live streaming throughout the symposium, so we hope that many people will be joining us. What I'm going to do, the organizers asked me to give just a few introductory comments about linking mass incarceration to population health. And I'm going to do that, and health disparities. And I'm going to do that in a little bit of a roundabout way, but I hope that you'll see the connection. And I just want to start by pointing out a fact, start with some facts, and a very important fact, which is that the U.S., as many of you I'm sure know, does very poorly on health compared to many other high-income countries. And this is a figure that shows how despite a very high health expenditure, the U.S. does much worse than many other wealthy countries on life expectancy. And in fact, there was a recent report commissioned by the National Academy of Sciences that went into quite a bit of detail on the factors that are driving this difference. And we compared the U.S. to 17 other peer countries on various health indicators. It's just one example that shows mortality from non-communicable diseases, and you see the U.S. at the very bottom of the 17 countries. This is also true for mortality for communicable diseases. It's also true for mortality from injuries. It's also true for mortality from violent injuries. The homicide rate in the U.S. is 7 times higher than the rate in the other OECD countries and 20 times higher for firearm homicides. Quite remarkably, this problem is present across the age span. This figure shows the ranking of the U.S. In mortality rates with respect to these 17 other countries across the age range. And you can see that for all ages, except the oldest old, the U.S. is at the bottom of the list. And there's some particular reasons why, some survivor issues that drive the patterns at the highest old age. But systematically, across the vast majority of the lifespan, the U.S. does very poorly. And quite remarkably, this implies a loss of years of life before age 50, the very productive years of life in the U.S., which is much higher than in other high-income countries. And you can see here that the U.S. losses before age 50 are double those of Sweden, which is the best performing country. So this is a big problem. And it's present across multiple conditions. Maternal conditions, communicable nutritional conditions, and injuries, drug-related, perinatal conditions, cardiovascular disease and chronic diseases, systematically across many different conditions. And in fact, the report identifies 9 areas where the U.S. does systematically worse than these other countries. So, and in addition, there are large disparities in these conditions by class and race. In addition, so if we looked at certain subgroups within the U.S., we would see even larger differences with these other countries, because looking at the overall pattern is masking some of these heterogeneity, although the heterogeneity, the diversity, doesn't explain the overall pattern. So what explained this, and what does this all have to do with our symposium today? So clearly, there can't be a single explanation for this difference. It has to be a multiplicity of interrelated factors. And these factors have to be linked to distal and upstream causes, which are driving multiple threads potentially, and social processes and policy. And certainly policies that affect the rates of criminal activity, that affect the rates of incarceration, that affects what happens to ex-prisoners, are all areas in which U.S. policies are quite different than policies in other countries, perhaps. And of course, I'm not suggesting that this explains the disadvantage that we're seeing, but it's something that we need to, it's one of the policies in which the U.S. one of the policy domains in which the U.S. may differ from other countries. And so this way of thinking about the determinants of health, which is very multi-level, integrating across factors, is a characteristic of the population health approach. Just wanted to show you this slide, which shows the average health services expenditures as a percentage of GDP compared to the average social services expenditures as a percentage of GDP. So you see the U.S. spends quite a bit on health services, but much less than the other countries on social services. And this may, we should start thinking about how this may connect to some of the themes that we're going to talk about in this symposium. And so I think I would encourage us as we go through these 2 days to think about the multiplicity of pathways and mechanisms and processes through which incarceration may be linked to health. And there are many experts in this room who will be able to develop this idea much better than I would be able to do it as an epidemiologist with little experience in this area, but just thinking about the pathways that might be involved. Incarceration may affect, obviously, the physical and mental health of prisoners, which has implications for family, social, and economic circumstances and economic opportunities. These things also affect each other. This may have impact on neighborhood environments. Incarceration rates themselves may affect neighborhood environments. And all these things, all these things are obviously related to, we know from other studies, affect the health of potential prisoners or ex-prisoners themselves, their families, and other community members. And of course, we have other driving factors like inequality in our society that may be affecting rates of incarceration and other mechanisms through which that lead ultimately to population health levels and also to disparities in health. So I think the challenge of ours is to think about, flush out some of these mechanisms, and there may be completely other ways of putting these things together than this very simple example that I've put together. And there are obviously feedbacks and other pathways. So I think thinking broadly about how these things might fit together is one of the themes that we hope to accomplish today in this symposium. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Morinoff, who will give us an overview of the program and say a few additional words.
Okay, thanks, Anna. That was a really great introduction and really lays out a lot of the thematic issues that we're going to be dealing with. And as Anna was saying, my task right now is not to present many substantive remarks, but to give you an idea of what the ideas of this conference are, how they interrelate, and how they emerged, most importantly in the minds of our young, current, and former RWJ scholars. So the first thing I want to do is just introduce them, because although Anna and I are up here giving the introduction to the conference, the real people who organized this are sitting down here at the front table and deserve all the credit for the great lineup of speakers we have, and also the tremendous excitement that there is about this conference, which is really palpable. So I'm going to just say a few words about each of them, and I'd like them to stand up. And I don't know if people in webcast land can see them, but at least people in the room, if you haven't already met them, can. So let me start with Maggie Hicken, who really was the brainchild for this whole thing. And yeah, so Maggie, and I should also say that one of the functions of this conference is to really jumpstart their careers and move them more in the direction of this emerging field of study on the linkages between population health and mass incarceration. And so, and that's where Maggie got this idea from, was that she wanted to move into this area and was starting to look around and saw that there wasn't a lot published, and put together, and then started talking to Natalie and Karina and came up with this idea. So let me just say a few words about Maggie. She's currently a research fellow at the Center for Social Epidemiology and Population Health here at University of Michigan. And before that, she got her PhD in the School of Public Health here, and was also a Robert Wood Johnson Health and Society Scholar. Her work examines a broad range of the social environmental factors that contribute to racial and ethnic health disparities in the United States. And they include factors as diverse as lead exposure, air pollution, residential segregation, neighborhood socioeconomic conditions, and psychosocial stress, with a really interesting emerging focus on the latter, on the effects of anticipated encounters with racial discrimination, what she calls racism-related vigilance. So that's some of the stuff that Maggie is working on. The next one I'd like to introduce is Natalie Crawford. Round of applause. Natalie received her PhD in epidemiology from Columbia University, and she's currently, sadly, finishing her second year here, which is the second of 2 years at the RWJ Health and Society Scholars Program. Her work is focused also on the social determinants of health and of racial and ethnic disparities in health. She began by studying the social networks of illicit drug users and their impact on racial and ethnic disparities and risk behavior, and also in HIV prevalence. And more recently, as an RWJ scholar, she's begun a couple of projects examining the impact of neighborhood change on health and health disparities, with particular focus on the community-level consequences of home foreclosures for population health. But she's also interested in linking those interests up with mass incarceration. And then last but certainly not least, Karina Grafe. And Karina received her PhD in sociology from Harvard University. Some of you may have heard of it, and is also finishing her second year here at our Robert Wood Johnson program in Health and Society Scholars. Next year, she'll be joining the faculty of Penn State University in the Department of Sociology and Crime Law and Justice. Her work is addressing the interconnections between spatial patterns of inequality, crime and criminal justice, and population health. And one of the main thrusts of her work is that in order to understand the connection between local communities and population health, we need to consider not only the neighborhoods in which people live, but also the wider geographic environments and social environments in which those neighborhoods are embedded, as well as the networks between neighborhoods that are created by factors such as daily commuting patterns back and forth, as well as patterns of residential mobility. And her work demonstrates that the connections between social context and health, sort of as Anna was saying, involve multiple levels and often complex interdependencies. So that's an introduction to our organizers. Let me just say a few more things about the conference, and start with a graph that you'll probably see over and over and over again at any conference involving incarceration, which shows you the size of the United States correctional population. And I'm only starting here from 1990. If you go back to 1980, the growth is much more dramatic. And this is tracked in terms of millions of people under correctional supervision in the United States. And the reason I'm showing this is to actually illustrate the genesis of this, the idea for this conference around research on this topic and research on population health. So on the other axis, you'll see plotted here a search I did in Google Scholar for research, scholarly articles that have been published year to year that had in their title the terms incarceration, prison, or imprisonment. And you can see it took the field like a little while to catch up with the trends in incarceration, but since like around 2000, we've been kind of keeping pace with the scholarly production of work on incarceration has been keeping pace, in fact outpacing in more recent years the trends in incarceration. At the same time, there's been this burgeoning field that Anna referred to in her remarks on population health, and that's reflected in this green line, which tracks citation searches to articles that have the terms health and also some reference to population or social factors, and that in recent years that's really exploded. But the point of the conference is identified by the next line, the purple one, that there's very little research that's looking at both of those sets of factors together. And that last line is the citation searches for, or the article searches for those articles that are looking both at health and at incarceration. And there's just very little of it to date, although it is, a lot of people in this room are starting to try to lead the way, the vanguard, to increase it. So what is this conference about? You have a program in front of you, but let me just give you a little bit more detail about what the thematic integration is. Today, the main theme is going to be how incarceration affects the health and well-being of those who have been or formerly were incarcerated when they get out. And we will cover a range of topics, including two very interesting keynote addresses on giving more of the criminal justice and more of the epidemiological perspectives on how to think about mass incarceration, the effects of incarceration on health and well-being after prison, health and the process of reintegrating when you leave prison into the community, which involves multiple dimensions, including reintegrating into family life, family strain and reunification, finding a place to live and deciding, or sometimes being decided for you, where you can live. That's the process of residential mobility and so-called neighborhood attainment. And then also the continued strain of living under community supervision, and with a special focus on the financial costs that it imposes. Tomorrow, we'll begin in the morning, and we will continue this the exploration of the broader impacts of mass incarceration on the health of populations and also health disparities. And we'll have another interesting keynote address by Becky Pettit that's going to focus on the consequences of neglecting the incarcerated population in any kind of study of population health and health disparities. And we'll also talk more about the familial and intergenerational health consequences of mass incarceration. So that's a broad overview of what is in store over the next day and a half. I just wanted to close by making a couple of announcements. First of all, if you haven't figured this out already, and I know it's hard to go to a conference these days without, connecting somewhere to Wi-Fi, you can do, if you're not from the University of Michigan, you can connect through the M-Guest connection. And then I wanted to say a few things about the question answers after each of the panels. There will be microphones. Where are the microphones? Where in the? Oh, okay. I'm still not seeing them, but they're somewhere over there. Oh, okay, I see them. So there will be microphones, and we will also be taking questions over the web. So the moderator of each session will be kind of handed slips of paper, and we'll kind of go back and forth between live questions and questions from people watching over the web. And I know this is a topic that really invokes a lot of passionate debate and personal experiences, and we want to channel that all productively. But I also want to just urge everybody, because we do have such time constraints, to keep your questions short and keep them as questions rather than using the time to make a speech. Let's leave that to the panelists, and let's just try to ask provocative questions, and then there'll be time between sessions also to continue those conversations. And then last, although you're probably not thinking about it right now, I just want to tell you that lunch will be eaten here, but we'll line up and go to the buffet a few rooms away from here, and bring your food back in here. So without further ado, then I will. Who's moderating the first panel? Is that me? I am. Okay, right. So I will now transition into my role as moderator. Thank you.